Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Somebody had to cover up their sins, and let's just say, it's not pretty. Okay, offered by SS Vintage, we've got a Gibson Les Paul Jr. from the year 1956. Now, when you first look at this thing, what stands out to you guys? Is it the giant black rectangle in the center? Probably. That's not supposed to be there. I mean, besides that, it just looks like a nicely worn-in Junior, but what is that all about? Well, if you're into 50s, 60s, 70s, or even 80s vintage Gibson guitars, or other brands for that matter, you probably have a very good sneaking suspicion that the wood is not quite right in that location. So let's go ahead and pop that cover off and see what we're hiding. Ouch. Not only was it routed for some sort of a trem system here, but also the P90 was enlarged for a humbucker, and this clearly was not professional materials used here. Alright, so if you ever see this shape, it's a rectangle with a little bit of a hat to it. That means it was a Kahler. It's not a full-on Floyd Rose system where they have to drill through the entire guitar. The Kahlers were top-mounted systems. And in fact, in the 80s, you could actually find them stock. Now, whether they're stock or not doesn't really matter to the value as much, but a good way to tell is zoom in right here. If it says Kahler, very unlikely to be original, but if it says Gibson, yeah, you've got a good chance. But you also need to take that out and see if you've got paint in the cavity or not. If you see bare wood like that, yeah, you know for a fact that that was done after the factory. And sadly, this was a very common practice in the 80s, as you won't struggle to find photos of people messing up their guitars. The worst thing is Kahlers have a bad reputation. A lot of people who installed them on the guitars had deep regrets, like instantaneously, or at least that's what the internet stories say. But for this to happen to a vintage Junior, oh man. But right now, what they did to cover all that up was to put this black plate on it. I actually had this exact same idea. You can check out this Les Paul Artisan episode. I thought, hey, this looks like a natural wood surface. What if I go to the hardware store, buy some vinyl plank flooring, cut it out, and just do that? Because I was just thinking, hey, I've got an Artisan that has a giant hole in it. I would rather have that be covered up. So I've actually done this project once myself before because what keeps that in place is your stop bar tailpiece. The proper way to fix this is to take a wooden block and make it the exact shape it needs to be and completely plug the hole. And even then, I would probably suggest putting like a veneer over top of all this so you don't get witness lines in the future. So if nothing else, always take a close look at your guitars that you're buying and look for the witness lines that do show up, because sometimes you can find, repaired Kahler guitars that aren't being disclosed properly. That's especially common on like Sunburst finish guitars because it's a little bit easier to hide on that. But word to the wise, if you ever find a Kahler routed out guitar and you want to make it a project, you can actually string them up. Just take the Kahler off, and normally you'll have the correct studs right here. You can put a tailpiece on there, you can put a bridge, and you can just rock it as is if you don't mind the big gaping hole. Now in this case, unfortunately, no, you're not going to be able to do that because this has the Kahler stop bar right here and then the original wrap tailpiece. So you would still have to install some sort of a bridge if you wanted to do that. So this one's a little bit boogered up to say the least. However, the rest of it isn't too bad. But can you imagine a Kahler and a humbucker in one of these things on a true 50s Gibson? I mean, remember, at one point in time, this was just a used guitar. It looks like we've got replaced tuners and a truss rod cover as well on this one. And potentially somebody routed additional inlays in there. I'm not sure if it's just that or if it's black marker. And it looks like our pots have been replaced as well. Complete player's grade here. So how much do they want for it? $7,000, man. I try to be nice on this show, but I don't understand that price point at all. To be generous, I would probably put it in the $35,000 to $4,000 range. As we can look at the Reverb price guide history, I mean, these things are starting to sell for quite crazy money. I remember back when I had like my stripped finish ones that I really liked that were like, I think around $3,000, and a clean example was like $6,000, $7,000. Now it looks like it's like $9,000 to $8,000 for most of them in clean shape. But there's a good player's grade example at like $5,000 that might have had a stripped finish. But personally, I would rather have a stripped finish one rather than one with a Kahler route and all other things wrong with it. And I'd certainly prefer to spend just a little bit more to get one that doesn't have so many issues. But to be fair, when you look at everything else on the market and that's half price, maybe somebody will want it. But continuing on with our Les Paul Jr. kick here, we've located the prototype Les Paul Jr. Is it the original? No, it's from 1986. But the seller described it as stunning sunburst example of Gibson's first prototype stamped Jr. With a title like that, I had to click this thing. Verify, is it actually stamped prototype? And if it is, then we can talk a little bit more about what makes these things unique. So sure enough, you go through it, you look at all the things that it's got, and bam! The best Gibson prototype stamp you can find. I really love collecting these style of guitars. It says Original Gibson Prototype. This is where the whole Gibson original modified decal comes from that we talk about in the demo shop. They reuse this prototype stamp. So you don't see these things all the time, but what this is when Gibson was under new ownership, Henry J and his people were coming in to revamp Gibson, they were trying to do these Les Paul Juniors, but they wanted to revamp them. As you can tell right here with the ABR1 bridge, stock from the factory, nickel hardware, stop bar tailpiece. Other than that, it is fairly okay to junior specs. I mean, honestly, they're a lot different. The neck profiles are nowhere near the same. You get way better Grover mini tuners on here than the strip style. They weren't trying to be a reissue. They were just trying to be a modern take on one of these. So it is kind of cool to see the prototype of this one show up. However, I really don't see a lot of collector appeal for this because these juniors aren't generally that sought after by collectors. It's more so finicky players that need perfect intonation. Purists just hate these because it's not the original Rat Tail, but you can generally pick them up between like $1,000 to $1,800 depending on condition. But they have been kind of hard to find lately. Doesn't look like there's any currently for sale, but here's a couple of good sold listings you can look at. They also did the double cuts, but these are all late 80s, early 90s. So they were in production for quite some time. And if I remember correctly, the 90s ones got swapped over to the P100s. I'm not exactly sure when that started, but that can be another difference you can sometimes find. And when it comes to stamp prototypes, 10,000 is always a great mark to shoot for, but this one probably falls under the category of like my Sonex prototype I used to own, where it probably won't fetch that much. It just takes a very particular collector to fall in love with it and want to pay you some money. So I wish them luck, but I don't know about that one. Maybe 4,000 to 5,000 to the right guy. But that's the beauty of owning a prototype, is you get to set the price. You don't ever have to sell it. It's like this Chet Atkins prototype I have. I don't particularly love it. It's not necessarily something I want to keep for my forever collection, but it's cool and I'm not going to just give it away. So I definitely don't blame these people asking the prices that they do, because if you have that stamp on your guitar, it is something special. But to round out tonight's episode, let's take a look at a couple of other juniors. So this is a 1959 Les Paul Jr. in 3/4 scale. So it's a double cut, it's a miniature, and it's just so ridiculous looking that you can't help but not like it. And the fact that it's been played heavily enough to get arm wear right here, the natural finish checking, I love this. Apparently there are some people who specifically seek out these 3/4 size models because they like the way they play and sound just a little bit better. I don't know if that has to do with their height, if they're shorter or have tinier hands, and they just happen to get along with this size of guitar and scale length a little bit better. But occasionally you do find 3/4 inch scale length Les Paul Juniors. I would love to see like a standard or something like this. I'm not sure if Gibson ever made any of those, but it wouldn't surprise me if maybe there was a rich dad out there that made it for his kid. The 3/4 burst. I hope something like that does exist. But if anybody owns one of these and wants to send it in on a loan, I'd be interested in documenting a 3/4 inch junior or special or something interesting. But generally speaking, these are a little bit cheaper on the used market, despite being more rare. It just comes down to desirability. So that one was 4.5. There's one for a little more than 5, one that's almost 6. Gotta say, like the wear and tear of that other one, they should almost be charging a premium for it. Oh my goodness. Was that factory? Wow, that's gotta be the most bizarre one I've ever seen if that is truly factory. Because I'd imagine most of these were probably custom ordered. So who's to say that an ABR1 bridge didn't come stock? It looks awfully crooked though. But it looks like we got some repairs on that. And even this one sadly has a headstock crack as well. But generally speaking, these things don't have a history of selling for quite that much. But if I remember correctly, the full-size ones in all original condition, they're pushing like 10, 12 grand nowadays. But hey, if a full-on junior is a little bit too expensive for you, but you want to get your 3/4 size on, check out a Melody Maker from like the late 50s, early 60s. So you can find the single cuts. You can also find the weird, freaky fish double cut shape ones as well. Those are a little bit cheaper. But take a look at this interesting one from 1959. Now this thing has been refinished and modified. It's got a full-on P90 on it. This thing has its own vibe. I like it because it's kind of like that 34 burst that I enjoy. It's got a nice dark tuxedo vibe to it. I feel like they could have got away with like adding a neck pickup though, like Telly style. That'd be an interesting one. But output jack on the front, volume tone. Poor man's junior is what this is. That's what people call Melody Makers that have been modified to have a P90 instead of their original single coil. But hey, the back on that actually looks surprisingly nice. And looks like modern updated tuners. So how much is this one for sale at? $1,500. I mean, I think if you're in the market for one of those, that is not the worst price we've ever seen. Like, here's what it originally looked like. Not quite as cool. And you can see the various asking prices and what these have sold for. But surprisingly, wow. One of these has not sold on Reverb in over 3 years. So can we really trust these numbers? I'm not sure. All right, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed our junior content tonight. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care.